Hello, welcome to Ekate's Crossing as we continue with the secret of Shambhala. Okay, so let's have a look. We're on to chapter 2. So let's see what message we get with the SIddartha Tarot for today. What message are we going to listen to today? What message is important in regards to this chapter? In regards to chapter 2, let's have a look. What are we looking at here? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Right. Okay, so we have first card, we have the Tower. So it does feel like with this, our world is going to be a little bit shaken up, but it gives us a chance to rebuild the path that we want. We can redesign our future the way that we want to. Very important to nurture yourself, to become more sensitive to your environment, to create a sense of new beginnings, new love. Radiating love is what I want to get there. There is going to be a shift, a shift in your ideas, a shift in your perceptions. So it may change your plans or ideas or your thoughts about where you're going and what you're doing. It's going to allow you to awaken. I do feel like there's a rebirthing, an awakening, a resurrection, a resurrecting of your inner self in a way. I do feel like there is an awakening within your own spirituality. So there we are. That's the SIddartha Tarot to sort of focus on there with the Tower. What does the Tower mean for you? Queen of Cups, Ace of Cups, Six of Swords, and Judgment. You know, maybe while I'm reading the chapter, that you will sort of get this enlightenment, this understanding about what the cards could mean for you. Okay, so chapter number 2 is called The Call of Shambhala. As Yin began to drive out of Lhasa, I was silent, looking out at the mountains and wondering what Will had meant by his note. Why had he decided to go on alone? And who were the Dakini? I was about to ask Yin when a Chinese military truck crossed at the intersection in front of us. The sight gave me a jolt, and I felt a wave of nervousness begin to fill my body. What was I doing? We had just seen intelligence officers staking out the hotel where we were supposed to meet Will. They might be looking for us. Wait a minute, Yin, I said. I want to go to an airport. All this seems too dangerous for me. Yin looked at me with alarm. What about Will, he said. You read the note. He needs you. Yeah, well, he's used to this kind of stuff. I'm not sure he would expect me to put myself in danger like this. You are already in danger. We must get out of Lhasa. Where are you going, I asked. To Lama Rigden's monastery near Shigatse. It'll be late when we get there. Is there a phone there, I asked. Yes, Yin replied. I believe so if it's working. I nodded, and Yin turned back to concentrate on the road. That's fine, I thought. It wouldn't hurt to get far away from here before making arrangements to get home. For hours we bounced along on the badly paved highway, passing trucks and old cars along the way. The scenery was a mix of ugly industrial developments and beautiful vistas. Well, after dark, Yin pulled up into the yard of a small concrete blockhouse. A big woolly dog was tied to the side of the mechanic's garage to the right, barking at us furiously. Is this Lama Rigden's house, I asked. No, of course not, Yin said, but I know the people here. We can pick up some food and gasoline that we might need later. I'll be right back. I watched as Yin walked up the board steps and knocked on the door. An older Tibetan woman came out and immediately pulled Yin into a full embrace. Yin pointed at me, smiled, and said something I couldn't understand. He waved for me, and I got out and walked into the house. A moment later, we heard the faint squeaks of car brakes outside. Yin darted across the room and pulled back the curtains to look. I stood right behind him. In the darkness, I could see a black, unmarked car sitting on the side of the road across from the rutted driveway 100 feet away. Who's that? I asked. I don't know, Yin replied. Go out and get our packs quickly. I looked at him questioningly. It's okay, he said. Go get them, but hurry. I walked out the door and over to the Jeep, trying not to look towards the car in the distance. I reached through the open window and grabbed my satchel and Ying's pack, then briskly walked back inside. Yin was still watching out the window. Oh my, he said suddenly, they're coming. A blast of car lights lit the window as the car raced towards the house. Grabbing his pack from me with one hand, Yin led the way out the back door and into the darkness. We must go this way, Yin yelled back at me as he led me up a path into a group of rocky foothills. I glanced back down at the house and to my horror saw plainclothes agents piling out of the car and encircling the residence. Another car we hadn't even seen sped around the side of the house, and several more men jumped out and began to run up the slope to our right. I knew if we kept going in the direction we were going, they would cut us off in minutes. Yin, wait a minute, I said in a loud whisper. They're heading us off. I stopped and put his face very close to mine in the darkness. To the left, he said, we go around them. As he said that, I caught sight of the other agents running in that direction. If we followed Yin's route, they would see us for sure. I looked straight up the most rugged part of the incline. Something caught my eye. A dim patch of the trail was perceptibly lighter. No, we have to go straight up, I said, instinctively, and headed in that direction. Yin lagged behind me for an instant and then hurriedly followed. We made our way up the rocks with the agents closing in from the right. At the top of the rise, an agent seemed to be right on top of us, and we ducked between two large boulders. The area around us was still perceptibly lighter. The man was no more than 30 feet away, moving round to where he would see us clearly. Then, as he approached the edges of the slight glow, seconds from seeing us, he abruptly stopped, started to walk forward again, then stopped again, as if suddenly having other ideas. Without taking another step, he turned and ran back down the hill. After a few moments, I asked Yin in a whisper if he thought the agent had seen us. No, Yin replied. I do not think so. Come on. We climbed the hill for another 10 minutes before stopping on a stony precipice to look back down at the house. We could see more official-looking cars driving up. One was an older police car with a blinking red light. The scene filled me with terror. No doubt about it now, these people were after us. Yin was also looking anxiously around the house, his hands again shaking. What are they going to do to your friend? I asked, horrified at what he might say. Yin looked at with me, tears and fury in his eyes, and then led the way further up the hill. We walked for several more hours, making our way by the light of a quarter moon that was periodically obscured by clouds. I wanted to ask about the legends Yin had mentioned, but he remained angry and sullen. At the top of the hill, Yin stopped and announced that we must rest. As I sat down on a nearby rock, he walked off into the darkness, a dozen feet or so, and stood with his back towards me. Why were you so sure, he asked without turning around, that we should climb straight up the hill back there? I took a breath. I saw something, I stammered. The area was lighter somehow. It seemed the way to go. He turned and walked over and sat down on the ground across from me. Have you seen such a thing before? I tried to shake away my anxiety. My heart was pounding. I could barely talk. Yeah, I have, I said several times recently. He looked away and was silent. Yin, do you know what is happening? The legends would say we are being helped. Helped by whom? Again, he just looked away. Yin, tell me what you know about this. He did not respond. Is it the Dakini that Will mentioned in his note? Still no response. I felt a rush of anger. Yin, tell me what you know. He stood up quickly and glared at me. Some things we are forbidden to speak of. Don't you understand? Just mentioning the names of these beings frivolously can leave a man mute for years or blind. They are the guardians of Shambhala. He stormed over to a flat rock, spread his jacket and lay down. I felt exhausted too, unable to think. We must sleep, Yin said. Please, you'll know more tomorrow. I looked at him for a moment longer, then lay down on the rock where I was sitting and fell into a deep sleep. I was awakened by a shaft of light rising between two snowy peaks in the distance. Looking around, I realized that Yin was gone. I jumped up and searched the immediate area. My body was aching all over. Yin was nowhere I could see. Damn, I thought. I had no way of knowing where I was. A deep wave of anxiety rushed through me. I waited for 30 minutes looking out at the brown rocky hills with little valleys of green grass, and still he had not returned. Then I stood up again and noticed for the first time that down the slope about 400 feet was a gravel road. I grabbed my satchel and walked down through the rocks until I reached the road, and then headed north as best as I could remember. That was the direction back towards Lhasa. I hadn't gone half a mile before I noticed that there were 4 or 5 people less than 100 paces behind me, heading in the same direction. I immediately left the road and moved well up into the rocks so that I'd be hidden, but could still watch them pass. When they reached me, I realised that it was a family made up of an old man and a woman of about 30 and 2 teenage boys. They were carrying large sacks, but the younger man was pulling a cart filled with possessions. They looked like refugees. I thought about approaching them and at least finding out which way to go, but I decided against it. I was afraid they might report me later, and so I let them go by. I waited another 20 minutes, then carefully walked in the same direction. For about 2 miles, the road weaved its way through the small rocky hills and plateau, until in the distance, at the top of one of the hills, I could see a monastery. I moved off the road and climbed through the rocks until I was about 200 yards below it. It was made of sandy coloured brick, with the flat roof painted brown, and had 2 wings, one on each side of the main building. I could see no movement, and at first I thought the place was empty. But then the door at the front opened, and I saw a monk adorned in a bright red robe come out and begin to work in a garden near a lone tree to the right of the building. He looked harmless enough, but I decided to take no chances. I walked back to the gravel road, crossed it, and made a wide berth around the left side of the monastery until I was well past. Then I carefully proceeded up the road again, stopping only to take off the parka. The sun was beating down now, and it was surprisingly warm. After about a mile, I was about to crest a small rise in the road. I heard something, and I ran into the rocks and listened. At first, I thought it was a bird, but slowly I realised it was someone talking far in the distance. Who? Taking great care, I moved up through the rocks until I had a higher position, then peeked over at the small valley below. My heart froze. Below me was the gravel crossroads at which were parked 3 military jeeps. Perhaps a dozen soldiers stood around smoking cigarettes and talking. I backed away, keeping low, and walked the way I had come until I found a place to hide between 2 rocky mounds. From there I heard something else in the distance, out beyond the roadblock. It was a low drone at first, and then a whirling, clapping sound. I recognized it was a helicopter. Panicked, I ran through the rocks as fast as I could, away from the road. I crossed a small stream and slipped, drenching my pants up to the knees. I jumped up and started to run again, when my foot slipped on one of the rocks, and I careened down the hill, ripping my pants and gouging my leg. Struggling to my feet, I kept running, looking for a better place to hide. As the helicopter closed, I bounded over another small rise, and was looking back when someone grabbed me and pulled me down into a small gorge. It was Yin. We lay perfectly still as the large helicopter flew directly over us. It's a Z9. Z9, Yin said. His face looked panicked, but I could tell he was also furious. Why'd you leave where we were camped? He half shouted. You left me, I responded. I was gone less than an hour. You should have waited. The fear and anger exploded in me. Waited? Why didn't you tell me you were going? I wasn't, though. Through. But I could hear the helicopter turning in the distance. What are we going to do? I asked Yin. We can't stay here. Back to the monastery, he said. That's where I was before. I nodded up, then raised up and looked for the helicopter. Luckily, it was veering off to the north. At the same time, something else caught my eye. It was the monk I'd seen earlier, moving down the ditch towards us. He walked up to us and said something to Yin in Tibetan, then looked at me. Come, please, he said in English, grabbing me, pulling me towards the monastery. When we arrived, we first walked through the side courtyard gate and past many Tibetans standing with bags and various belongings. Some of them looked very poor. Then we reached the main building of the monastery, and the monk opened the large wooden doors and led us through an entry room, where more Tibetans were gathered. As we walked by, I recognized one group. It was the family I had let pass me on the road earlier. They looked at me with warm eyes. Yin saw me looking at them and questioned me about it. I explained that I'd seen them back on the road. They were there to lead you here, Yin said, but you were too afraid to follow the synchronicity. He glanced at me sternly and then continued to follow the monk into a small study with bookcases and decks and several prayer wheels. We were then seated around a more lately carved wooden table where the monk and Yin carried on an extensive conversation in Tibetan. "Let me see your leg," another monk asked in English from behind us. He carried a small basket filled with white bandages and several dropper bottles. Yin's face lit up. "You two know each other?" I asked. "Please," the monk said, offering his hand while bowing slightly. "I am Jampa." Yin leaned towards me. "Jampa has been with Lama Rigdon for over 10 years. "Who is Lama Rigdon?" Both Jampa and Yin looked at each other as though not sure how much to tell me. Finally Yin said, "I mentioned the legends to you earlier. Lama Rigdon understands the legends more than any other person. He is one of the foremost experts on Shambhala." "Tell me exactly what has happened," Jumper said to me as he dabbed some kind of salve on my scraped leg. I looked at Yin, who nodded for me to comply. "I must present what has happened to you to the Lama," Jumper clarified. I proceeded to tell him everything that had occurred since arriving at Lhasa. When I finished, Jumper looked at me. "What about before you came to Tibet? What had happened?" I told him about my neighbour's daughter and about Will. He and Yin looked at each other. "And what have you been thinking?" Jumper asked. "I've been thinking that I'm in over my head here," I said. "I'm planning to head to the airport." "No, that's not what I mean," Jumper said quickly. "This morning when you discovered that Yin had left, what was your attitude, your state of mind?" "I was scared. I just knew the Chinese would be on me in minutes. I tried to figure out how to get back to Lhasa." Jumper turned and looked at Yin, frowning. "He doesn't know about the prayer fields?" Yin shook his head and looked away. "We've discussed it," I said, "but I'm not sure how it matters. What do you know about these helicopters? Are they after us?" Jumper only smiled and told me not to worry. Excuse me. That I would be safe here. We were interrupted by several other monks delivering soup, bread and tea. As we ate, my mind seemed to clear and I began to assess the situation. I wanted to know everything about what was going on right now. I looked at Jampa with determination and he returned my gaze with a profound warmth. "I know you have many questions," he said. "Let me tell you as much as I can. We are a special sect here in Tibet. Not typical. For many centuries we have held the belief that Shambhala is a real place. We have also held the knowledge of the legends, verbal wisdom as old as the Kala Chakra, which is devoted to the integration of all religious truth. Many of our lamas are in touch with Shambhala through their dreams. A few months ago, your friend Will began to show up in Lama Rigdon's dreams of Shambhala. A short time after that, Will was led to this very monastery. Lama Rigdon agreed to see him and found out Will was also having dreams of Shambhala." "What did Will tell him?" I asked. "Where did he go?" He shook his head. "I'm afraid you must wait and see if Lama Rigdon will give you that information himself." I looked at Yin and he attempted to smile. "What about the Chinese?" I asked Jumper. "How are they involved?" Jumper shrugged. "We don't know. Perhaps they know something about what is happening." I nodded. "There's one more thing," Jumper said. "Apparently, in all the dreams there appears another person, an American." Jumper paused and bowed slightly. "Your friend Will wasn't sure, but he thought it was you." Okay, that's it for today. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care and blessed be.